Now that our good friends from South High are here, we are ready to begin. We are a very intergenerational audience, and we are very happy to have with us today not only people from South High and Worcester State College, but also people from the community who are working really hard on this issue of hunger. As you know, this is the 25th anniversary of Worcester County Food Bank, and we are in the business of ending hunger in our backyard. And these public forums are part of a whole awareness campaign because we know that this is something we can do, and we need everybody in the community to do it. So I welcome you all and want to say that it is very exciting that we started this forum with Congressman Jim McGovern here with us, sharing his week on a food stamp budget. And remember, the man told us he never wanted to see another lentil again. And Jim helped to launch us on this whole series. And now we are ending up by talking about food stamps in a very important and public policy way. So I welcome all of you, and I would like to welcome Dr. Maureen Shamgochian, who is the Acting Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs. Now that's enough.
I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to Worcester State College on behalf of Janelle Ashley, President of our college, and especially for the finale of your Food for Thought Fall series. I want you to know the college recognizes and appreciates your focus on the causes of hunger, and certainly is very honored to play any small role in finding solutions to the problems of hunger. Today we're very fortunate to have Senator Ed Augustus with us, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Senator Augustus. State Senator Edward Augustus Jr. is a Democrat from Worcester, serving his second term in the Massachusetts Senate, representing Worcester's Grafton Hill, Vernon Hill, Webster Square, and Quinsigamon Village neighborhoods, as well as the communities of Auburn, Grafton, Leicester, Millbury, Shrewsbury, and Upton. Augustus serves as Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Election Laws and Chair of the Senate Committee on Bills in the third reading. He also serves as Senate Vice Chair of the Joint Education Committee, Senate Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on Veterans and Federal Affairs, and Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Public Service. In addition, he serves as a member of the Senate Ways and Means Committee and the Joint Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. For 6 years prior to his election to the Senate, Augustus served as Chief of Staff to 3rd District Congressman James McGovern. A leader on education issues, Augustus was also a high-ranking official at the U.S. Department of Education during the Clinton administration. At 24 years of age, in 1989, he was the youngest person ever elected to the Worcester School Committee, on which he served 2 terms. He also served 1 term on the Worcester Human Rights Commission. The oldest of 3 children, Augustus grew up in a 2-family house near Webster Square in Worcester. He attended Gates Lane Public School in Worcester and graduated from St. John's High School in Shrewsbury, the first in his family to graduate from college. Augustus worked his way through Suffolk University in Boston to earn a bachelor's degree in government and history. And in 1999, Augustus received a master's degree in government from the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for speaking with us today, Senator Augustus. Thanks.
And I want to thank Worcester State, and I want to thank Maureen in particular for her leadership on this issue. This is just another example of how Worcester State College's impact goes much beyond the boundaries of its campus. That Worcester State has made itself a vital part of this community, an integral part of our community, and serves us in so many ways, not just in educating people, here on the campus, but really educating our community and bringing people together and serving as a facilitator for us to make a difference on important issues. So thank you, Maureen, and thank you to Worcester State. And I'm also very happy to see some students from South High School here, which is also in my district. And we got a lot of great, young, active students who care about their community. We hear a lot about people kind of putting down young people, about how, you know, there's other distractions in life, but I think what we need only look over here at some of our young people and see that there's great promise and hope in our future with young people like this who really care about their community and are willing to do something about it. So I wanted to give a shout out to all of them and thank them for being here. I'm just very pleased and honored to be asked to come and just say a few words about Pat. And I've had a chance to work with Pat since I've been in the State Senate. Really kind of early on in my term in the State Senate, she approached our office about, you know, helping us work on getting some additional funding for state agencies, particularly the Department of Transitional Assistance, give them the resources that they needed so that Massachusetts would no longer be ranked the 51st state. Every other state in the District of Columbia are ahead of us in terms of the number of people who are eligible for food stamps and the number of people who actually get them. And that's something we all should really be ashamed of, quite frankly. And it really was her ability to bring together not only a caring about this issue, but also the expertise and the knowledge on how to do something about it. That's really the two critical pieces. You need to care about the issue and you need to know how to do something about the issue. And Pat really embodies both of those things coming together. And she helped educate me. We brought people up from Washington, D.C., from the National Conference of State Legislators. We held briefings at the State House. We educated my colleagues and their staffs on why this was important. We were able to get several $1 million to upgrade some of our infrastructure to make sure that it's easier for folks to apply for food stamps, that they get the food stamps they're entitled to the first time. We had an issue where people were rejected numerous times because of our kind of technicalities and problems with processing the applications. And after you get denied once or twice, it's really hard to convince you to come back a third or fourth time and fill it out again. And that really is a process problem, and that's a government problem. And it was really Pat's leadership that identified that and helped us figure out how to try to make a dent in that. And I think, hopefully, we're going to see that Massachusetts is no longer in that embarrassing position of being 51st, and we're going to be moving up and making sure not only that more people who need food stamps get them, but also, quite frankly, that the money that the federal government is willing to give to us gets spent here in Massachusetts. That's a good thing for our economy. We're leaving money on the table that can be spent in our local stores that helps stimulate our economy, and that's a good thing, too. So I want to congratulate Pat for this well-deserved recognition that she's going to receive here today, but I also especially want to thank her for her leadership and her passion and her expertise. The Commonwealth is a better place. And a lot of very needy people are better off because of that. So thank you and congratulations.
One of the things that the Intergenerational Urban Institute does every year is to provide some recognition for someone who is a community leader in bringing people of all ages together. And in this particular instance, we want to honor Pat Baker for her ability in leading and sharing this Food Stamp Improvement Coalition of people from all over the state. Her ability to bring together not only the advocates and the people who are working hard, but also the commissioner of the Department of Transitional Assistance, the people who are the food stamp supervisors throughout the state. Together, what's happened is they've ironed out some of those hurdles, and they've made it more possible for people to get the food they need by getting food stamps. And today, this award that we're presenting to Pat is the Evelyn Degnan Intergenerational Service Award. Am I back on? Yes. Evelyn was a member of the Worcester State College community, came here to Worcester State and earned her degree in urban studies. helped us form the Intergenerational Urban Institute. And whenever I did anything that sounded like it was for elders only, she corrected me quickly. And she said, intergenerational is where it's at, Maureen. That's how we have to look at things. Evelyn came back to school, and even after she graduated, worked with us, helping to form the Institute. She went through 3 different bouts of cancer, and each time after her treatment, she'd come back and be part of the action. She's a woman who volunteered all her life, and right up until the end. So we call this the Degnan Intergenerational Service Award, and I would like to read it to you. The Intergenerational Urban Institute at Worcester State College presents the Degnan Intergenerational Service Award to Pat Baker, Senior Policy Advocate of the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, in recognition of her outstanding advocacy, vision, and leadership in improving access to food stamps for Massachusetts residents of all ages. I just want to say the reason why my inbox and my emails are always jammed is I get 1,000 emails a month from Pat Baker, and she upgrades all of us on what's happening. And I want to say that she works tirelessly, and we are so fortunate to have a champion like this, because folks, even though I'm on the board of the food bank, if the food bank and everybody in this college got involved in volunteer service on behalf of hunger, it would be wonderful, but it wouldn't make 1/10 the impact that gets made when people who are eligible for food stamps get them, go to the grocery store and buy food the way everybody else does. So thank you, Pat, for championing this.
I guess I'll let you do some more math counting here. I started legal services in 1977. So it was 30 years ago. I was 10 at the time. I was at UMass, actually, and started an internship there while I was at UMass, and then a job opened up, and I finished college through night school. I did paralegal work for about 7 years in Holyoke, Massachusetts, and then came to Boston in 1983. So I'll still leave you guessing, but it's been a long time. And it is work that I love on many levels, not the least of which is that my sister spent 6 years on AFDC and food stamps, struggling with that reality when she was a teen parent. And I truly believe that anything can happen, and poverty can hit you at any time when you least expect it. And we need a safety net in place to guarantee that. And a country such as this, as wealthy as it is, I mean, I'm pleased that the food bank and the Worcester County effort has continued for 25 years, but it's a sad commentary on the wealth of this country that we need food banks and these kinds of programs to underwrite the ups and downs of our capitalist economic structure. But that is the reality in this country, and so we need to work with it. And what I do is try and work with it on a number of areas, in hunger and immigrant issues and homelessness. So I'm going to focus my comments on the food stamp program, but I think all of these arenas of poverty are something that there can be quite a bit of advocacy we can do. What I'd like to share with you is some techniques or tactics that we've used to improve the food stamp program over the years, but also I think tactics that are useful in any kind of public policy advocacy if you want to see the state or federal government make a change. As the Senator said, we were in the doghouse in food stamps. From 2000 to 2004, Massachusetts was the worst in the country as far as food stamp participation. We were 51st, including the District of Columbia. This is an analysis done by the Mathematical Public Policy Institute that looks at the U.S. Census data on poverty and compares it with the food stamp caseload. So we didn't have the largest number of people who were not getting food stamps, so we had the lowest percentage, only 39% of Massachusetts residents who they found were eligible for food stamps were getting it. Our caseload was down to 220,000 persons. We were turning away $200 million a year in federal, 100% federal food stamps. Under the Agriculture Department's own assessment or analysis, food stamps, every dollar of food stamps puts $1.85 back into the economy. So we were not only turning away federal dollars, but the stimulator effect of that dollar was being lost in Massachusetts. If you look at the food stamp program participation compared to WIC, which is for women, infant and children's, pregnant women, or school breakfast and lunch, they were in the top quadrant, top 20% of participation compared to other states. But food stamps was in the doghouse. And I will say today our food stamp caseload has doubled. What we don't know is exactly where we stand relative to other states, but I know we're getting close to the middle. Why did this happen? Why did this happen in Massachusetts? Well, we've had 16 years of governors who have not believed in human services, have not believed in supporting a safety net that really supports people in hard times. And that was really evidenced, I think, most starkly in 1995. Massachusetts passed a very aggressive welfare reform bill in the state. We were actually the first in the country to have a 2-year time limit. I don't know if people were around at the time and did any advocacy at that time, but we had one of the shortest and earliest 2-year time limits before the federal welfare reform laws came through in Congress. And not only were we telling people you have 2 years for welfare for AFDC, you also, we don't care what happens to you after that. And we did not make an effort in the state to make sure people continued on other benefits like food stamps. So at the same time that we implemented an aggressive welfare reform policy, we slashed the food stamp program as well, and there was no interest in making sure people continued. The second phenomenon that occurred at that time was 1996, and unfortunately this was an initiative of the Clinton administration, but embraced hardly by the Republican Congress. We passed the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act of 1996, the federal welfare reform law, and that went after food stamps as well. Massachusetts, we lost about 8,000 people who were considered individuals 18 to 50 without children, who we said you have to work to earn your food stamps. You have to work at community service jobs in order to earn the money that you can buy for food. And the management of that alone caused 8,000 people to go off. It was impossible to find places for people to do community service or track them. The court systems heavily rely on community service now for people, and there's so many agencies that can barely absorb volunteers on this sort of regular basis that they were insisting upon. The other loss was the immigrant community. Massachusetts has been one of the largest immigrant states in the United States. I think at the moment we're 10th or 11th in our non-citizen or foreign-born population compared to other states. 7th in terms of the refugee population, which are people who come to the state as refugees, but overall I think about 10th or 11th as far as the foreign-born population. The welfare reform law of 1996 went right after the immigrant population. About 8,000 to 10,000 people lost benefits. Legally present immigrants, not undocumented people, legally present people who did not fall within a very narrow definition of who is considered qualified under federal law. So people with pending applications for asylum who have work authorization. These are people fleeing persecution who have to wait 7 or 8 years to get that status in the United States. They lost the benefits, and countless others like that. The third phenomenon, which is a little more subtle but was part of, I think, what was happening in the state in the 1990s, was a hostile administration, a very hostile administration. Not only do we have a 2-year time limit and dismantling of benefits on a federal level, but we had an administration that was looking at closing welfare offices, increasing the demand on verifications on the pieces of paper you had to produce, an obsession with the error rate, which is when USDA comes in and measures whether or not the state is actually providing the accurate amount of benefits. State workers were so focused on the error rate because of pressure from the management that they were spending an inordinate amount of time trying to process cases error-free, and a lot of families lost benefits. I come from Gloucester, where we still have some fish in the waters, but and one of our comments is that, the fish rots from the head. I think the lack of leadership from the governor's office had a lot to do with state agencies not being able to have the infrastructure in place to support the food stamp program, to support the caseload. We saw a growing number, just in one of the offices alone, 75% reduction in clerical staff. The staff who take the calls, file the pieces of paper, They were gone. They were eliminated from the Boston area office. I'm sure the Worcester office experienced similar declines in staff who could process the benefits. We didn't see any investment in the phone systems. We didn't see any investment in making the work environment comfortable for workers to be able to process those cases. So as a result of these changes, unfortunately, these cuts, Rosie's Place actually started something called the Food Stamp Improvement Coalition. Rosie's Place is a program for homeless women in Boston, provides some overnight services, but primarily is a lunch program, social services program for homeless women in that area. They wanted to start a Food Stamp Improvement Coalition to be able to start addressing some of these concerns. And I'm going to tell you two stories of two initiatives that the coalition undertook, one with Rosie's Place, and they've since moved on, and one the coalition took over subsequently, to give you an idea of the kind of advocacy we decided we have to do to get at some of these systemic problems that were plaguing the state. We were mindful of the fact that this was 100% federal dollars we were losing. We were mindful of the fact that Massachusetts was the absolute worst participation in the country. We were turning away money. And the fact that families desperately needed this food. They were increasingly going to soup kitchens and food pantries and not being able to make choices, to make the dignified private choices about the food that was appropriate for them and their families. Getting prepared food doesn't give you a lot of choice. Doesn't enable you to buy the foods you know, you like, your children like, that you'll eat. So the first initiative we worked on was something that was specifically targeted for elder and disabled households. There's a federal law that was passed as part of the Food Stamp Act that says the Social Security offices have an obligation to take food stamp applications at Social Security office, district offices. How many of you were aware of that? Oh, well, in fact, Social Security office weren't aware of that either. We did an informal survey with students, and we asked them to call the 32 Social Security district offices in Massachusetts and say to them, whoever they got on the phone, first of all, track how many times they called and how long it took to get answered and get a live body. And then once they got that live body, to say, we work with clients who have SSI, supplemental security income. Can we send them to take a food stamp application? Only 7 of the 32 said yes. The rest said no. So we did a little study. We published that little study. We sent it to the Secretary of Social Security Administration in Boston, Manny Vaz. We said, look, there's this federal law that says you're supposed to take applications for SSI applicants and recipients, and only 7 of your offices even have a glimmer of what that means, and said yes. And there were conditions on those 7 offices saying, well, it depends on X, Y, and Z, but at least they acknowledged that obligation. Between that very simple advocacy of just documenting the problem, and then letting the Social Security hierarchy know we were aware of this, and DTA, the Social Security Commissioner, agreed to sit down with us. We also sent that study to Senator Kennedy. We said, look, this is a federal office. Aren't you interested in what they're telling us? And they were, of course, very interested. And the minute you carbon copy the senator or a member of the congressional delegation, it definitely gets the radar up for the state agencies or federal agencies. As a result of that survey, Social Security said, yeah, you're right, we do have this obligation under federal law. And we're going to send out a memo telling our staff. Well, we know that memos don't go too far, and they don't often get implemented, or read, or remembered. So we let that go on for about 6 months. And then we went back and asked them to give us some reports on how many food stamp applications were being taken and shipped over to DTA. Tiny percent. But it gave us something that we hadn't realized was quite powerful, which was some leverage to get Social Security to cooperate in a pilot with DTA to actually get food stamps automatically for SSI recipients. There was a pilot going on in Washington State at the time, another pilot in South Carolina called a Consolidated Application Program, which meant if you apply for SSI, Social Security can ask you a question about food stamps and electronically ship over information to DTA to process your food stamps. So we decided the best thing to do was to get Social Security to partner with DTA and go after this pilot, go after these food stamps. Most states were having real problems with their Social Security offices cooperating, but we had nailed them initially with the data that they were violating the existing federal law. So they decided to cooperate, and in fact, just to kind of bring it home very quickly, Social Security and DTA put a waiver request together to Washington, the Department of Agriculture. Senator Kennedy weighed in, Senator Kerry, in support of that application for a waiver. DTA got the approval within a year. It took some time to negotiate. And then, and this was the icing on the cake, DTA agreed that rather than wait for people to have to come in and apply for food stamps, they would literally mail food stamp cards out to people. And if they took those cards and went food shopping, that was an electronic signature to get them on food stamps for 3 years. 60,000 people got those food stamp cards and went food shopping. And that was the first huge leap in the food stamp program in Massachusetts. The second initiative I'm going to speak about is kind of gets at the more pervasive problem of customer service, of processing of food stamps that the Senator referenced. We know the state agencies are overly burdened with a lot of cases, a lot of paperwork, but nonetheless, they have an obligation to administer this entitlement program we call food stamps. Anyone who's eligible has a right to apply, has a right to get their benefits processed, and get a food stamp card. The trouble is that the local offices were not getting the support they needed from the state, from the governor, to be able to administer this program. We had chronic complaints, and I know the Worcester County Food Bank and other folks from legal services in the area were constantly documenting problems with applications that were sent in, going into the circular file, meaning they were thrown away or ripped up, people not getting their food stamp cards timely, people sending in verifications or documents over and over. The worker said, gee, we didn't find them, we don't know where they are, not getting the interviews they're required to get. During the course of the years of the coalition, USDA came to the table, the Department of Agriculture, and they heard these stories over and over again of lack of infrastructure, lack of processing of food stamps at a local level. So we asked them to do something called a program access review, a study of the state where they would do a random study of certain offices, talk to clients, talk to workers, look at the caseload, to figure out what were the access barriers. Language access, where people are getting interpreters, failure to correctly document files, where people's verifications getting lost, were interviews happening timely, and they did a fairly methodical documentation of what was going on. But we also put together a very detailed report from community-based groups of their experiences trying to access food stamps. How many times did someone have to call just to talk to a worker? How many voicemail messages did you leave? All of that we documented in the report, which USDA actually incorporated into their report of the state's failure to comply with the service requirements of the food stamp program. And then we sent the report to the Globe. We got an excellent front page story. It was actually New Year's Eve in 2005, where they did a whole expose of the fact that the state was 51st in the country in food stamp participation, and there were countless barriers in getting an application filed. And I think as Maureen and the Senator noted, how many times are you going to go back and do it again and again? How many times are you going to resubmit verifications before you get discouraged? So based on that experience and that documentation, which is tedious, it's not the same as a simple phone call to survey a question. It is the kind of day in and day out grunt work of documenting a problem and recording that documentation. We were able to get the attention of the feds, of the Globe, and of the legislature. We talked with Senator Augustus. Remember some of the early meetings where we discussed how can we start to address some of these core infrastructure problems. This is all federal dollars, 100% federal money we're turning away. What can the state agency, what can the state legislature do to get at this money? A lot of advocates in other states say, why do you work with your state legislature on a federal program? It's all federal dollars. Well, you're right, it's federal dollars, but the state legislature gives the state the money to run the program, to administer it, and half of that then comes back from the federal government. So we have the convenience of having a line item or a pot of money that the legislature appropriates for the state to run this program. And we decided the best thing is to micromanage that line item, to drive the Romney administration up the wall. And that's exactly what we did. They're like, we're not going to let you get away with this. We're going to use this line item to tell you what you should do to run this program better. And that was the tactic that we felt was most effective in leveraging more federal dollars. So with the Senator, we hosted a couple forums. including, I think one of the most effective ways to propose ideas is to look at other states that are doing them well and saying, why can't we do this? If Washington is doing it, or Utah is doing it, they've already tried it, let's try it here. So, and we also went after funding specifically to help DTA do a job better. We worked closely with the union, SEIU, who represents the workers, to figure out what was needed in addition to more frontline workers to make their jobs easier. Call centers for interviews, document imaging where they don't have to track pieces of paper. But again, these were two campaigns in addition to very specific language telling the department you can't ask for verifications a second time if you've already gotten them. We had, and for a number of years, we literally micromanaged DTA so that they wouldn't be able to take their admin money, administrative money, and do what they chose. The other group we got involved were the grocers. It's really interesting when you think about it. It's about now $400 million of federal money that comes into the state. Where does it go? Stop and Shop, Shaw's, Market Basket. It goes to the grocery stores. So they have an institutional interest here in making sure that food stamps works. I know some stores don't want people who are poor in their stores. I don't think that's an option for them. And we've battled that with some of the food markets. But in general, we got to break down. The nice thing about the electronic benefits program is you can actually see where people spend money. So we got a breakdown of all the of how much Stop and Shop and Shaw's and the major grocers actually get per year in federal food stamps. And using that information, went to the Grocers Association and asked for their help in pushing the legislative package through and the budget package through. So where are the pressure points in a campaign? Those are just two kind of snippets of two campaigns that I think have had a fairly significant impact on improving food stamps in Massachusetts. Getting SSI recipients on automatically without having to apply, just using the data that Social Security collects. Trying to improve the infrastructure at DTA so people don't have to go into an office, they can make a phone call through an interview center or have document imaging. Those are two campaigns that we decided were the best way to try and improve participation in Massachusetts. We have a number of other campaigns we're working on now. But I want to just reflect on kind of what makes those campaigns successful and what I think are the kind of common pressure points for any campaign that tries to make government more responsible and responsive to people. The first, the congressional delegation. I have to say, without a doubt, they have been so supportive of everything we have done. I know a lot of people will call members of Congress for individual concerns. You're dealing with Social Security, you're dealing with immigration matters, you call them for help, and then you think they spend the rest of their time in committees voting on bills or budgets. The congressional delegation, the senators and congressmen, love to be able to run interference in the state. They love to be able to tell federal agencies what to do. They're more than, I've never had a problem with any member saying, what can we do to be helpful to move an issue along? So, and they also recognize that a tremendous amount of federal dollars is at stake that they can leverage for Massachusetts. I think it was the Northeastern Labor Studies Department found that Massachusetts pays much more in federal tax dollars than we ever get back into the state. I don't have the exact figures on that study, but some states are quite poor and they need more federal dollars, and that's appropriate, but we really lose quite a bit of federal money because we haven't made an effort to leverage it through the past 16 years of Republicans. The second pressure point, I think, is the state legislature. As I mentioned before, even though food stamps is a federal program, the state legislature has an interest in seeing the money come back to the state, and they have control over how agencies run. That gives them the leverage to be able to force them to take steps that they might not otherwise take. California actually also did some research on the food stamp program and found that if you increase food stamp benefits or participation, it freed up money households would otherwise spend that would be then taxable. In other words, if I get $100 more in food stamps, now you don't pay taxes on food, but if I get more money from food stamps for food, I've freed up $100 that I can buy on taxable items, and that feeds the state's tax revenues. So sometimes some of those economic analyses are very helpful in making the case that Not only is there a general multiplier effect in the economy, but we're losing tax dollars by not having the federal food stamps here. The third pressure point is the administration, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am that we have a Democratic governor in this corner office. It has been 16 long years of not getting phone calls returned, of having to do formal requests for information, of battling constantly with the old administration to get things done. What worked in the past was bad press, was saying to them, if we don't get this, we're going to have to be in court. I'm not a lawyer, but my colleagues were readily in court suing them constantly. They hated bad press, and that was the pressure point we used to get them to the table. As I mentioned before, the Grocers Association. They have $400 million now in revenue they bring into Massachusetts. I think we can get another $200 million in federal revenue. They should partner with us on food stamp initiatives. They should give customer preference for any food stamp recipient. They should give discounts for vegetables and healthy foods automatically for food stamps. They are getting a lot of money out of the federal government that we're helping them get. They should be partners at the table as well, and I think that's something we should be looking more closely at in the future. And then there's obvious other allies as well. The medical community, the labor community, all of the state workers, our unionized workers, the municipalities as well benefit directly from the program. So where does this bring us now in terms of advocacy work? We've got a lot more to do. I think even with the Democratic governor, we don't have a money machine, as far as I've found so far, centered in the basement of the State House. So there's still a lot of work to do to be able to restore what's been lost in the last 16 years in terms of safety net programs and benefits. But I think some of what can be restored is at a federal level. And until we get Massachusetts to the top in the food stamp program, I think we're losing a lot of revenue to the state that will have a beneficial effect in the rest of the economy. In the work we do in the Food Stamp Improvement Coalition, intend to continue to monitor. Even though we've got a great governor and commissioner, we still need to monitor what's happening at a local level. We need to make the case for more staff to process these applications. It doesn't sound like a glamorous campaign, but I think unless you have enough workers at DTA to be able to handle the cases, they're just going to get denied. They're going to break under the effort of that. We need to get participation data in pockets of the state. Where's the highest poverty? Areas that aren't getting the food stamps that they need. We need to look around the country at promising practices that have worked better than what we're doing in Massachusetts, and we keep sweeping the country for those practices to see what we're overlooking. We need to keep our congressional delegation informed. Every step of the way, they have been incredibly helpful. They just want to be asked. And I think where you have an issue, either with the Social Security Office, the Veterans Administration, or USDA, asking them and advising them of what's going on is a key part in the partnership. And I think we have to keep our client communities involved. The people who are most needy, most dependent on the programs have also the best and most direct experience with what it's like to be living on food stamps. Not only is it enough, but what's it like at the local stores? How are people being treated? Are they getting customer preferences? What can we do to improve the buying power of this program, at the same time working with Congress to try and increase the benefit? So those are my kind of general thoughts about where we go from here. There's still a lot of work to do, not only here but in other areas, and I welcome continuing with the Worcester Food Bank and the Coalition to be able to move these initiatives forward. As I look at it now, we have 3 years remaining to undo 16 years of damage, and I'm hoping we have more than that, but we know we have 3 years with the Patrick administration when we can try and rebuild what we used to have in this great Commonwealth, which is a true safety net. So, thank you.
I have a question. Speak up. I'm sorry, I just can't.
I can repeat the question.
Okay. In January, I retired from a government organization as a secretary, a job that I love, the city of Worcester that I love being part of. Now, we know the problem here. One of our problems is every day, every hour, we receive a phone call for help. Either I need food, I need heat, I need this, I need that. so we had to refer somebody to someplace. Our problem was, you could refer somebody to somebody for food stamps, you could refer to somebody to, but we have this government that is more for less. So you have less clerical staff. You have these people that, I would say to someone, okay, call this for food stamps, call back. And they call me back and they say, we can't get through. We don't understand the language they're talking. I came from a little community in Connecticut where they went into the communities and talked to these people. I think the food stamp program and some of these programs that you do, and I don't mean to offend anyone in this building, but I think that's what's happening. I found my job. I mean, I loved my job. I loved working for who I worked for. I think Worcester is the best. But I think the fact is it's so complicated. People don't understand about food. They call an organization that you give them a phone number to call about the food stamp. First of all, sometimes they can't get into that number. Second of all, if you call Social Security, you need an appointment to have an appointment. So by that time, you could starve to death. I think that because we have this more for less as far as clerical staff is going, I think we're beating a dead horse. I think we just need to make it easier for people to understand the food program. We need people out in the community that can outreach these different people. We need, when someone calls the welfare department, we need someone that understands what they're saying. And it's not always language interpretation, because in the city of Worcester, we have every organization possible to work with our people, but we don't have enough clerical staff to be able to do this. And I think that that's why people, you call 4 or 5 times, you can't get in. Well, I guess they don't care. The people, they don't care because there's just not enough of you to work with me.
You're making some excellent points. Did everyone hear generally the comments that there's just so much bureaucracy that stands between individuals and the services? And I also would agree with you that there's, as we reduce human contact, which is going on in every state agency, so that people never talk to a live individual, it just exacerbates the problem. And I worry a lot, and this is a challenge I give to the young people here in particular, because I'm sort of a Luddite is someone who's not really sort of technologically savvy, and I'm kind of like borderline Luddite. But I think we have to look at what happens with information technology systems and if they're going to leave people behind because of language, because of kind of unfamiliar skills. My 88-year-old mother will not use an EBT card, or an ATM card. She just feels like it's going to blow up the machine or she'll never get it back. And I feel like we're going to lose populations with phone systems and with technology. I agree with you that we sometimes see technology as a panacea, that it's going to solve problems. And I think in human services we have to keep the human in there, which is one of the reasons, that I think that one of the things we have to make sure is that there's enough state workers to process the food stamp program. I think food stamp outreach is great, but I honestly think that if DTA had enough staff to take and process the food stamps, we wouldn't have to pay people to find people to outreach for food stamps. Anyone could just call up and say, I need food stamps, and boom, it would happen. We're getting a little further beyond in the private nonprofit sector when I think government itself has an obligation to do the services it does as well as it can. So I would like to keep the focus on making the government strong and active. I know there's another question, if you can hold on for a minute, and then maybe afterwards we can talk more. There was a question, I think someone raised their hand in the back. No, so you were stretching. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I wasn't the person who raised.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Why don't you identify yourself, Ann, okay?
Ann Bureau, Worcester Community Action Council, Worcester Communications. In Worcester, fortunately, there's a bunch of agencies that do take food stamp applications, so I imagine that does help the DT office quite a bit, and I wonder how frequent that is in other communities.
Yeah, there are organizations that take applications either through the virtual gateway or on paper. Does it help DTA? The federal food stamp rules are extremely complicated, unfortunately. You can make an application as simply as a name, your address, and your signature. That doesn't make the other questions go away. There's a whole host of questions that the state has to ask. and verification that they have to get. I think it helps to get people filing an application because it logs their date of when they filed and it gives them some preliminary information. But the bulk of the work actually has to be done by the state workers, and under federal law, they can't outsource that. They can't have non-state workers do the interviews or confirm the verifications, if you will. So I think it helps get people through the front door, but that's only one of about 10 steps in the application. And that's, I think, one of the confusing things about the virtual gateway in particular is it's only about a 50%, well, it's actually higher, it was only a 30% approval rate initially, it's now closer to 50%. There's a ton of work that needs to be done once the application is filed. I will also caution you that paper applications often don't get input into the system, unfortunately. I would stick with a gateway because you know the information gets over there. Paper applications, we have heard, get circular filed. I'm sorry to say that, but I know that from actually talking with workers themselves. We don't have the staff to input these paper applications. It's not uniform, but it happens, yeah.
Amy Bressett, I'm from Family Health Center and I'm the food stamp outreach worker there.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Ann was saying. And though I do all my applications by virtual gateway, that work still goes to DTA.
Yes, that does.
Everybody gets faxed to DTA and they pick up the case. I mean, my clients come to me for any assistance they need, and so that's an option for them not having to go to the welfare office.
Yes.
But they're still doing the bulk of the work, getting them approved and all
They have to do the interview. Our hope, and what Senator Augustus sponsored in the budget initiative a couple of years ago, is document imaging, so that rather than paper being faxed over to DTA, it gets actually scanned and then coded into the system, so that what we have found is people fax, mail, hand carry documents, and they still don't get logged in. And I think that has a lot to do with the lack of clerical staff. You're asking workers to manage two systems, a paper system and an electronic system, and there's just a huge breakdown when they don't have the support staff. Unfortunately, the union that represents clerical workers, NAGE, has not been as active in supporting an increase in clerical staff as SEIU, the union that represents the workers.
So really, when you think about it, the 500 applications that I've taken,
Yeah.
that's making more work for DTA, because I'm sending those applications.
It is, and they need staff to support that. I think the applications helps them get in the door, but it doesn't process them, and that's the part I feel like if we want to make government work well, we need to support that infrastructure.
I have a question, a little bit different direction. I just was doing, by the way, my name's Chris DeBow, I'm a student here at Worcester State. I noticed in some of the reading that Family Dollar stores are now accepting food stamps as of 2006. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why they say in their last quarter reported a 35% jump in sales because they're accepting food stamps. So yesterday, and I've been at Family Dollar, I've been at Dollar General, great places to shop. But I noticed the food choices there were not healthy. And I realized, and that's one of the things I think about, you know, we need to make sure they're getting healthy food. When these people get food stamps or the EBTs, are there any kind of pamphlets that go with maybe a suggestion of what you should spend your money on for healthy foods?
You know, it's interesting you're raising a really interesting question because it's also a question that's swirling around Congress as well, and there's a lot of discussion right now on kind of obesity issues and healthy food eating. Most studies show that people make food choices based on calorie content. And if you have, in other words, if you have 300 kids at home and you have a limited amount of money to buy food, you're going to buy things that are going to fill your stomachs. And so the option of healthy eating, I know this is an issue of discussion with the farmers markets in particular. People can't afford with food stamps the food that's provided at farmers markets. It's very expensive. And you know, a head of lettuce is not going to give you the same calories as pasta, unfortunately, even though we can discuss which is healthier or not. There are materials that have been put out over time. USDA has materials that they put out on the food pyramid and healthy diet purchases. The new USDA food pyramid, when it was costed out, food stamps doesn't even cover half the maximum allotment. It doesn't even cover half of what's required. And then the Congressman McGovern, in his attempt to eat a food stamp diet for a week, found it was almost impossible. to meet the nutritious needs. I don't believe that poor people should be further micromanaged. I think the state should, but I don't think poor people should be told how to eat. And I believe this firmly for two reasons. One is I think you would end up spending a lot of administrative money managing the food stamp program, and it's not enough of a benefit to begin with. I think food stamps is pathetic, the amount that we give people to survive on. And one of our goals is not only to get more people on, but to increase the actual benefits that people get. And if you divert that into managing how they eat, you have less money. And second, I think that most people do, and I know this from family experience, most people make wise choices when they have the resources to make those choices. And it's easy to kind of get critical about individuals' food choices when you're at the store and you see someone using the EBT card for potato chips, but I don't think that's actually the norm. I understand that the Family Dollar choices are not fresh food choices. It's unfortunate, but they're cheap choices and they're high-calorie choices. And I think that's the reality that some people are faced with when they don't have a lot of money. But that's my personal view, not something I work on directly.
So in other words, we don't give them a pamphlet?
We do, yes.
Oh, we do.
USDA
Okay.
produces the pamphlet. I'm sorry, yes, that's
Yes.
there, but that's
Yeah,
all
okay.
we do. And I think until we
that's
can
great.
get some more resources, it's hard. Everything on the pamphlet is stuff that's beyond their purchasing power under the new food pyramid.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes.
Xavier Johnson.
Speak loudly.
It would seem to me that there's some incredible work that you and it seems like a host of people have done around educating state and federal legislatures on the problem of people getting food. And then you're working with this grocer association, and it seems like there's a little turmoil there, or some differences of opinion there. But through lots of studies, it shows that it's the subsidies that we're given to major farmers or whatever that are not really growing any food for us to eat is what's causing food to be at the price that it is, and that's why farmers market foods and healthy food is more expensive than the high-calorie food. So if food is to produce this energy so that people can go out and work and do all these things, it would seem that some of the efforts that we need to make for Congress and the state legislature would be how do we make one of those campaign pressure points is to change how certain farmers are getting subsidies so that instead of them going inside of a store and thinking that they should get this high-calorie food such as pasta versus the lettuce that you talk about, it would be more reasonable, or their dollars would go further if they bought fresh fruits and vegetables.
Did everyone hear that? These are excellent points, that the farm subsidies that are provided are what make foods less competitive, really, the healthy foods less competitive. I think you're right. There's a physician, Dr. Alan Myers at Boston Medical Center, who's done a lot of excellent research on the whole issue of the farm industry and the subsidies and how they're driving a lot of the food choices that are available to low-income families. I'm not an expert in that area by any means. What I look at from a grocer standpoint is if they're getting all this money, why can't they help us with some of our food stamp campaigns to improve more money in the state, because they have a direct vested interest. I would like to challenge them. The farm subsidy issue is a national issue, and there's a lot of interests in that are hard to control, not the least of which is what's happening now with ethanol and the development of corn. But on a state level, I think we can think about approaching the Grocers Association to minimally give food stamp recipients the same customer, the little cards you get for Shaw's and Stop and Shop, the customer preference cards. Why can't you just automatically get that if you're on food stamps? They don't need you to sign yet one more document or carry one more piece of plastic around. And why can't we at least get them to think about some healthy eating promotions? If you use your EBT card, you get 2 for 1 or something. I mean, I think we should, at least on the state level, try that approach. And I also wonder, are there any licensing issues that you have to have with the Board of Health, for example, where we could get the Patrick administration to think about licensing supermarkets that give discounts for food stamps for certain healthy purchases. I would like the carrot. rather than the stick. I would hate to see policies that drive how people eat. I think it's important to give people the privacy and dignity to make the food choices that they make without kind of micromanaging it. But there's a lot on the federal level that could be done, and I know Congressman McGovern's office has been working a lot on some of those issues as well. Thank you. Was there, did any of the students have a question? I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Gladys Smith, and I do food stamp outreach through the Intergenerational Institute here at Worcester State. And my question has to do with the paper application form. I also want to say thank you for answering my email about a problem I was having the other day.
Oh, all right.
For your efforts on that.
Thank you.
That was great. But I also wanted to say that those of us who do help people out with food stamp paper applications, I don't feel that it's a bad thing that we do it, or we're giving more to the DTA to do. Some of these people never would have initiated going through the DTA, so at least it's getting them started on a program.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It's huge to have the outreach. It's just when I've looked at the data, the number of denials of applications. I mean, if you walk into a DTA office, the likelihood of approval is much higher. And if you do virtual gateway, it was 30% approval. It was terrible. Paper applications, we were told we're not getting input. I mean, so I think if you stick on the case and you make sure and you call and say, did you get this and what do you need next? And so you actually do more than the application, the success rate goes up. But it's sad that we have to fund that kind of advocacy to get the state agency to work right. And I just would like to see the day where people feel good about applying, they apply online, on paper, and it happens. And you don't need someone monitoring every step of the way. And I think that means improving the infrastructure. That's what I'm saying, but I think the outreach is key, but when you look at the data on the approval denial rate, and these are folks you've pre-screened, you've already figured out they should be eligible, right? So then, why is the approval rate so low for pre-screened populations? That's frightening. That's what I think we need to get at.